Everything to do with luck, everything to do with the providence of the Lord in all things, as we will discuss here momentarily. So I want to thank Hiram for opening our sermon series. It's kind of a miniature sermon series. It's going to be topical over the next couple weeks. It'll take us to the last Sunday in November on the topic of Thanksgiving and the importance of Thanksgiving. And so before getting into the particular passage this morning and what I would like to talk about, I want to share with you just kind of a brief intro to this series of why this is important in talking about this important topic of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is probably, it would be hard for me to overstate the importance of cultivating a heart of gratitude in our lives. Thanksgiving ought to be, should be, and needs to be. It needs to be one of the primary things that we think about when we think about discipleship, when we think about worship, when we think about prayer. So often we believe in the power of prayer. We talk about the power of prayer. Sometimes prayer becomes so familiar to us, we think about prayer primarily in terms of asking God for stuff, right? Prayer is you're going to make a petition, you're going to ask God for something. Have you prayed for that? And that is correct. Praying includes petitioning and asking God to intervene, to help, to do something, for God to act in some way. But prayer is more than that. We ought to, as we're thinking about prayer, we ought to be thinking about thanksgiving. And so frequently in Scripture, the content of prayer is thanksgiving. Thank you, God, for what you have given to us. And so prayer and thanksgiving are inseparably linked. And this is one of the reasons why we focus on here at the Ridge, giving thanks to God for all that He has done for us. It's in terms of the formation of a human, thanksgiving is one of the most important things that we can do in cultivating a heart of thanksgiving, because in what we're going to see this morning is that it is dangerous for us to not give thanks. There's a danger in not giving thanks, in not being people that are filled with gratitude. And we're going to see here in Romans chapter 1, those verses 20 to 25, that the Apostle Paul is going to talk about what went wrong with humans. Right? So if someone asked the question, why is there evil in the world or why is there sin in the world? You could probably answer that in a few different ways that would be accurate. That would be fine, that would be theologically accurate. Or as you think back to the fall in Genesis chapter 3, we look at the sin of Adam and Eve, and we say, look at what went wrong with humanity. That too would be a good answer. The Apostle Paul here gives an answer to that question, what went wrong with humans? And the way that the Apostle Paul answers the question is that they didn't give thanks to God. So one way you could put, what is wrong with the world? What is wrong with humanity? An answer that you could give to that is, we stopped giving thanks to God. And from that error, from that sin, comes a whole litany of bad things that flow from that the Apostle Paul is going to talk about. And so this is the title of this sermon this morning is, it is dangerous for us not to give thanks. And we're going to unpack this morning some of those, what are some of the dangers of not being people who are filled with gratitude. And as we look around, and we want to apply this in this series, we want to apply this generally to our culture. We want to understand that. But my hope, brothers and sisters, is that we end this sermon series here in the last part of November when we go into a Christmas season. That we walk away from this sermon series not simply being critical of an ingrate world, an ungrateful world and culture. Although I think we have that. What I want us to do, my hope and my prayer for us, is that we walk away as members of the Ridge, that we would walk away being people who are convicted and looking to cultivate thanksgiving in our own hearts. So not just look at out there, look at how awful the world is. Although there are times I'm going to give illustrations and applications, it's not my intention to do that as finger pointing and looking, saying, look at how bad those people are out there, but that has nothing to do with me. When we illustrate by pointing out into our culture the dangers of a society that does not give thanks to God, my intention and my hope in that is that we would learn something about that for our own lives. That we would understand that as a cautionary tale for me to make sure I am not ungrateful, that I'm not unthankful, and that I'm cultivating, we're being intentional about cultivating a heart that is filled with thanksgiving, because it is not, and one of the things that the inference that we can draw from Romans chapter 1, verses 20 to 25, where the Apostle Paul talks about this, the inference here is that it is not, giving thanks to God doesn't just happen naturally. We're not inclined to do it. Although the passage will say we ought to have given thanks to Him, we ought to have honored Him, but we don't. And so we want to recognize that there is something off in us as humans when we do not intentionally cultivate thanksgiving in our heart. And we want to treat Thanksgiving not simply as a season, as a month that we come to and say, okay, this is Thanksgiving time. We have a time as a nation where we give thanks. Hopefully, where our nation is aiming their Thanksgiving is to the Lord, is to God, although that frequently doesn't happen. But we recognize that fourth Thursday in November as Thanksgiving. We want to understand as well, Thanksgiving is a part of what we do all year. It's a part of what we do every day of our lives. And so what I want to do this morning is I have 4 points here. The first point we're going to be talking about here in this passage in verse 20 and 21, the Apostle Paul is going to give the basis or the grounds for giving thanks. He's going to talk about here's why humans should give thanks to God. And then we're going to look at 3 areas. There's more that could be given. But then I'm going to look at 3 dangers. What happens to humans when we don't give thanks? And one of the things that we're going to see along the way as well is the controversy of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a controversial thing to do. You're going to see the power behind it. You're going to see the transformative power behind it. You're going to see it that this is at the very heart of discipleship. It is at the heart of worship. Thanksgiving, giving thanks to God and honoring Him is at the heart of what we do, even when we gather together on a Sunday morning. And it's something that is supposed to be primary in our lives. And we're even going to talk about this morning and in this sermon series, talking about the Eucharist. You've heard me say this before, but I don't mind repeating it. Eucharist is the Greek word Eucharistia. Eucharistia is the word for thanksgiving. When we come to the elements, this is a thanksgiving meal. The Eucharist, Eucharistia, thanksgiving, and is central to Christian worship. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that this morning. We're also going to come back to that in a couple weeks ahead. And so let's dig in here into our passage. We're going to look at the basis of Thanksgiving, why the Apostle Paul says humans, and here he's referring to he's talking about all humanity, even though the Apostle Paul is writing to Christians in Rome. The Apostle Paul is giving, the book of Romans is the longest and most high definition picture of the gospel. It is a treatise, it is a theological treatise on what the gospel is. And the Apostle Paul is a master of rhetoric, logic, theological debate, and one of the things that he is anticipating as he's unfolding and uncovering what the gospel is, one of the things that Paul is anticipating are certain objections that his presentation of the gospel is going to arouse. And so the one of the primary applications of Romans chapter 1, verse 20, which I'm going to read here in just a second, one of the primary applications that he's giving here is, well, what about people who've never heard the gospel? I don't know if you've ever encountered that particular objection as you're sharing, but there's all these people out there who've never heard the gospel. They've never read Romans 9. They've never read Romans 8. They don't know about justification by faith apart from works, Romans chapter 3, Romans chapter 4. There's people in villages and places all over the world. What about these people? And the Apostle Paul, at the beginning of chapter 1, addresses this objection. It's one of the most, it's an objection today when you preach the gospel. It was an objection 2,000 years ago when the Apostle Paul was preaching the gospel. And in that, we're going to uncover secondarily that the Apostle Paul says, here's what went wrong with us as humans. So Romans chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. Sylvia, I recognize I only have verse 20. I'm going to read that. If you would be able to skip down to 21 when I get there to one or the other. I think I left it later on in the PowerPoint slide. Thanks. Thank you. Romans chapter 1, so verse 20, as we're looking at this here, it says this, for his invisible attributes, so God's invisible attributes, things that you can't see about God, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. They are without excuse. Now, let me pause here just for a second. An entire sermon could be and needs to be preached about this particular passage, because here the apostle, what he's saying in answering that objection, what about people who've never heard the gospel? What the apostle Paul says is he says they're without excuse. They're without excuse, he says, because God's power, divine nature, his invisible attributes are clearly perceived from what? From creation, from the mountains, from the sun rising to the sun setting, to the stars, to the trees, to the clouds, to everything that is out there. This leaves all humanity without an excuse. Now, I'm not going to answer this question this morning, but I'm going to just leave it here with you in your mind. The Apostle Paul says the evidence of creation is sufficient to condemn. The question becomes, is the evidence from creation sufficient to save? That's an important question that should be asked and answered. Evidence of creation is sufficient to leave no human with an excuse. They are without excuse. Now comes the question, can looking at the mountains and believing in a creator God, is that sufficient information to save someone? That needs to be unpacked. And the Apostle Paul, by the way, answers that question later on in his letter in Romans chapter 10. He answers that question. So before us, so how does this pertain to Thanksgiving? Let's look at verse 21 here. As the Apostle Paul says this, for although they knew God, we have to ask the question, in what way did they know God? What kind of knowledge of God was this, and to whom Paul is referring? But here he's speaking a blanket statement over humanity. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God. And here is the central phrase of this sermon this morning. They did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Their foolish hearts were darkened. So here the Apostle Paul, notice he says two things in this: honor and thanks. Although they knew God, although they should have looked at creation and known something about the invisible attributes of God, that's not what happened. They didn't honor God or give thanks to him. Now, honor and thanks, and we're going to come back to this we're going to unpack this here in just a moment. Honor and thanksgiving that the Apostle Paul gives here, those two things are linked. They're necessarily linked. And we're going to see this. To give honor is to give thanks. To give thanks is to give honor. Now, there's more than one way to give honor to someone besides thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, though, is necessary, giving thanks, in order to give honor. So you might say, honor is more than giving thanks to someone, but it's not less than that. It's inseparably, they're inseparable from each other. To give thanks is to honor. To give thanks is necessary for worship. We do not properly honor God. We do not worship him the way that we ought if giving thanks is not present. Okay, and so this is what the Apostle Paul is introducing here. And then this brings us to the fact that Thanksgiving is very controversial. It's controversial for many reasons, for lots of reasons. But as we look at creation, it gives us the basis for everything that I, as a human, am supposed to be thankful to God for. All humanity, not just the Christian, all humans. But if this pertains to all humanity, then it certainly pertains to me. It certainly pertains to you. That God has made everything. And so how many reasons do I have to give praise, thanks to God? They are innumerable. Every single ray of sunshine that has touched my skin, every morsel of bread that has nourished my body, every drop of water that has cooled and refreshed my thirst, every cool breeze, every rain cloud, every single thing, every beat of my heart, every breath that I draw, every hair on my head, every single thing that I have, every piece of clothing in my closet, everything in my pantry, every dollar or cent in my bank account, all of it was made by Him and for Him. All of it. And as such, I am to give thanks to God for His goodness. And so this is where he begins, the Apostle Paul. That's the basis and the grounds of our thanksgiving, is that God has made us. He's made me, He's made you, He's made everything. He's the one who's responsible for all this as we look around. Everything in the universe God has created. And without Him was not anything made that was made. Now, I brought up that Thanksgiving is controversial. It's controversial in a few different ways, but Thanksgiving is controversial at least in these ways. Number one, when we give thanks to someone, and when we give thanks specifically, as we're talking about giving thanks to God, we are giving God credit. That's the reason why in an atheistic society or culture, the idea of Thanksgiving, November, is unsettling and uneasy for people. Because it's recognizing ownership, it's recognizing where all of this came from. Giving thanks is a theological statement. You are giving credit to someone. You are saying, you are recognizing that they have done something. There's a person there and they have contributed. That's what Thanksgiving is. And so there is you might say for us, the reason why this is dangerous for us not to give thanks is because there's a sense of injustice, and rightly so. There's a sense of injustice when credit is not given where credit is due. And injustice happens. When we don't give thanks to God, we're not giving credit to Him for what He has done, and that is an injustice, that we are infiltrating against God, that we are performing against God. When we fail to give Him thanks, we are failing to give Him credit. Right? So if somebody helps me with my microphone, I say, thank you. Right? I've given credit. I've acknowledged what they've done. To not give credit is not to give honor. To not give thanks is not to give honor. It is a recognition of ownership. It is a recognition of honor. But it's also, it might think of it this way, it's also, when we give thanks, it is a recognition that we understand where we're standing. We understand where we are standing. Okay, so think, for example, if you invite me over your house and you cook an amazing meal for me, steak and lobster. I'm giving you ideas. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But you invite me over your house, right? And we're hanging out, and I say, thank you for having me over. I appreciate this. Thank you for your hospitality. What am I doing there? I'm recognizing your ownership of your house, and that I'm a guest. You have invited me in, and I say thank you for that. Now, how often is that thank you appropriate? Say, every time I'm over your house. If you're showing me hospitality, you're showing me graciousness, I say thank you. So one of the questions that should come to us is, how often should I say thank you to God? When we say thank you for His creation, we're recognizing I'm standing in His house. This earth is His. It belongs to Him. It's not my house. Now we could talk about that He gave humans dominion over it, that God gave us stewardship. But that's what we are. We're stewards. Lord Denethal is a steward. He's not the master of the house. I'm a steward. I'm recognizing that I'm living and I'm operating in someone else's home. So what that means is that when I come over your house and I say thank you, what I am indirectly also doing is I'm recognizing that there's a certain deference and a respect that I'm supposed to pay to your property. There's a certain deference and respect that I don't just come trouncing into your house with my muddy shoes and kick over your TV and just let my kids just come in and just run rampant through your house and breaking your stuff. When I say thank you, I'm indirectly recognizing your ownership. I'm recognizing your hospitality. I'm recognizing what you've done. But I'm also recognizing that there is a certain deference that is paid in, and you might say that I need to show respect to your house, and that I can't just do whatever. I'm not the Lord of your house. I can't just do whatever I feel like doing when I'm in your house. When we give thanks to God, what we are saying is, God, my body is not mine. When I give thanks to God for His creation, I'm recognizing that I just don't get to act however I want. God has certain house rules, certain rules of the house that God has given. It means that when I'm interacting with you, I don't get just to treat you however I want. All of that is behind giving thanks to God. If I say, God, I thank you for the people, my friendships, the people of the Ridge, I'm recognizing that you belong to Him. And that means I can't just treat you however I want to. When we start cultivating thanksgiving in our heart, it transforms our heart to be inclined towards obedience to God. I'm respecting Him, I'm honoring Him. And to not give thanks to God means that disobedience to His house rules are right behind it. And that's what we see in this passage. When humans stopped giving honor and thanks to God and recognizing His ownership over the world, His ownership over our bodies, that it's not my body, my choice, God's body, God's choice. When there is a failure to recognize, to honor God and to give Him thanks for what He has given to me, a whole bunch of bad things happen downstream. And this is the reason for Psalm 24, verse 1. I think it's probably the second slide. There we go. Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and those who dwell therein. It is a recognition. Because of this, it is appropriate and right for us to give thanks. The earth belongs to the Lord. And every human, every single human belongs to Him. He has made them. So we give Him thanks. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 13, we see that even all the way down to our bodies, not just the creation, the trees and the mountains, but in 1 Corinthians 6:13, the Apostle Paul is answering a problem in the Corinthian church where they believe that what is the purpose of their body? Right? And there's this whole debate, but Paul gets to the heart of it right here when he says food is meant for the stomach and the stomach for food. Notice it's in quotation marks. That's what the Corinthians were saying. That was the saying of the day in Corinth. He responds to that and says, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So the Apostle Paul here is saying our bodies are for what? Are for who? It is for God. God is the one who has made our body, so my body is for Him. It's not for sexual morality. It's not for me to do with it whatever I want. Thanksgiving shows ownership. It shows God's credit to what has been done. Okay, so that's the basis. The basis of our thanksgiving is in seeing the things that God has made. And let me give now 3 dangers to not giving thanks. What happens to us as humans when we do not give thanks to God for what He has done and for what He has made? It's dangerous, number 1. It is dangerous to not give thanks because it is how God is honored. Okay, so I introduced this a moment ago. Let me go a little bit deeper into this point. When we don't give thanks, we do not honor God. Romans chapter 1, verses 21 to 23 say this. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. To not give, and so this is what happens when we do not give thanks to God. it means that we do not honor him. And as I said, those two things are inseparable from each other. Last week, we recognized Veterans Day. We celebrated Veterans Day. And so one of the things that people talk about is we want to honor our veterans. And we honor our veterans. Here at Push Ridge, I believe they put on some kind of slide. They had an embarrassing picture of me from my Marine Corps days. They put that up. I didn't know that they had a chapel Veterans Day presentation. And then I went to cross-country practice later that day, and the kids were coming up to me, "Oh, Coach York, thank you for your service." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah." Like, "Well, how did you guys know?" Like, "Well, we saw a slideshow, and there was a picture of you." I was like, "Oh, okay." So when we're talking about honoring our veterans, what are we talking about? How do you honor your veterans? Well, we could say it could be a whole list of ways that you can honor your veterans, but at the heart of it is people come up and they say, "Thank you. Thank you for your service." You're honoring that person. When we don't give thanks to God in a worship service, we have not honored him. There's other ways that we need to honor him, but that, you might say, is at the very heart and at the very core of what we do. And the communion elements, the Eucharist, Eucharistia, that means thanksgiving, to give thanks, is the way that God has prescribed for us to say thank you. So I want you to think for a moment. One of the things that we teach our children is, one of the things we ought to teach our children, is to be people who are thankful for what they've received. Right? So imagine for a moment that your child is at a birthday party, and somebody gives your child a gift. They open up their presents. Now, right after the gift is opened, what is it that you as a parent tell your child to do? You need to go say thank you. You need to go say thank you to your grandma, your grandpa, your uncle, your friend. You've received this gift. And what you must do now for the child is to help the child understand the importance of being thankful. Now, if the child is not, you got little Timmy there. Timmy always gets picked on in sermons. You have a little Timmy there, and Timmy says, "Oh, he's 5 or whatever." Timmy doesn't want to give thanks. He's received the gift. He's got the PlayStation, he's got the toy, he's got the device, and he doesn't want. What happens if he doesn't want to say thank you? What do you, as the responsible parent, do? You say, "That's okay, Timmy. Maybe another time you can give thanks. We'll wait until your heart. We'll wait till your heart is into it." Because you don't want the child just going through the motions, right? No, of course, we don't want the child just to go through the motions, but we still force the child, rightly so, we still tell the child, "No, you need to go say thank you." Because you understand as a parent that if you raise a child that is ungrateful, that leads to a whole bunch of other problems. You raise someone who is an ingrate. They're entitled. And as such, they will be deformed in a whole bunch of ways. But the thing of it is that's not just true of children. That's true of us. We have to learn to say thank you after we've received something. After we've heard, after we have benefited from God, we need to say thank you. God, like a parent, tells the children, "Here's how you just say thank you." Now, if Timmy says, "No, well, I just, I kicked him in the shin, that was kind of my acknowledgement of, I walked over to my friend, kicked him in the shin, and said, 'Yeah, we're good, thank you,' like, no, this, thank you for this gift. God has prescribed to us as his children the way that he wants us to say thank you for what we have received. It's the reason why at the end of every service, we never walk away without saying, "Thank you." That's the reason, because I recognize in terms as communion goes, sometimes the thought is, and I can understand why people will say this, if we have communion every week, it makes it not as special. I understand that there is an error to be avoided, that we do not want to be guilty of vain repetition. Right? And Jesus talks about this in his Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Don't be like the heathen, the pagans. They think they're heard for their many words. Don't give in to vain repetition." And unfortunately, I think the emphasis was put on repetition in terms of the corrective, but I think the actual issue that God has a problem with isn't repetition, it's vanity. The answer to vain repetition isn't stop repeating. The answer to vain repetition is meaningful repetition. Right? That's the reason why, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said this, that God is younger than we are, because he delights in repetition. And he says to the Son every morning, do it again. Right? Aren't you glad that God gives you meaningful repetition? His mercies are new for you every morning. That's meaningful repetition. He gives you daily bread every day. Now, it would be a cruel God and a cruel father who said to you, well, I don't want to give you food every day. I mean, I want it to be special, right? I don't want it to be vain repetition. The answer, the cure, the antidote to vain repetition is meaningful repetition. How often should we say thank you? We should say thank you constantly. But as a church, we gather around this table at the end of every service because we do not want to walk away from the Father's house and the Father's presence without recognizing the benefit and the blessing that we've received. And this is the way that we say, thank you. Thank you, God, for worship. Thank you for your scriptures. Thank you for salvation. Thank you for, it's an opportunity. Now, it's more than that. It's more than, but it's not less than that. It's way more. It's pregnant with meaning, this table, but it is not less than those things. And so, as we think about the dangers, what is the danger of not giving thanks to God? In verse 23, the Apostle Paul here shows us that one of the things, a lack to give honor and thanks, so again, those two things are linked, just like someone says we're going to honor our veterans. One of the ways we give them thanks, we thank them for that, their service. Now, when that's not present, what will always happen 100% of the time, without fail, is verse 23, which is idolatry. It's dangerous to not give thanks to God because what's downstream of that is idolatry. In verse 23, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. When we don't give thanks to God, we will give thanks somewhere. When we don't worship God, some people, we understand that every human worships, every human gives thanks. Every human gives praise. The question is not whether or not humans give thanks or whether or not humans worship. The question is, what do they worship? What do they give thanks to? And if someone says, I refuse to give thanks to God and I refuse to honor and give worship to the God of the universe, then their praise, their thanksgiving will be directed somewhere. To merely humans or to idols or to money or to fame or to sexuality. It will go somewhere. They will give thanks to something, but what they will give thanks to is the creature, the sun. It's the reason why humans started worshiping the sun and the moon. It's because it's built into us as humans to give worship. It is built into us as humans to give thanks and to give praise and to give honor. And when that happens, when we don't give thanks to God and we begin giving thanks to the creature, it drives us insane. It drives us mad. It makes us crazy. It causes a whole bunch of sins and a whole bunch of things that kill us, that destroy us. So giving thanks is not, what I want you to hear in that, is that giving thanks is not something that we just ought to do. It's something we need to do. We need it. It is food for your soul. It stabilizes you. I heard somebody in the Connections class talk about this. And then they told that one of their patients, they need to give thanks because it puts their feet on solid ground. When we recognize who God is and we honor Him, it causes us to see the world rightly. Our entire worldview is framed by who and what we give thanks to, and we don't do that, or we become idolatrous. The second danger here, so the first danger is that when we do not give thanks to God, we do not honor Him as God, and problems come. The second thing, and these three things are overlapping and interrelated. It is dangerous for us not to give thanks because it blinds us. In Romans chapter 1, verse 21, the Apostle Paul says this, "For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened." Now, some people would want to maybe make a hard and fast distinction between thinking and the heart, mind and the heart. There might be a distinction there that Paul is giving, but it's also likely that these are overlapping at least to a degree, where the Apostle Paul says they didn't give thanks, but they were darkened in their hearts. Okay, what he's talking about here, what does it mean to be darkened in my heart? Well, what this is it was synonymous for is that I'm spiritually blind. When you have a darkened heart, you have a blind heart. Here it's speaking of the spiritual condition of the human. They're spiritually blind. They can't see. What is it that they're blinded to? They're blinded to God. They don't see God. They don't see God's hand in their life. They don't see God's hand in the details of what's going on. They don't see him at all. And this is the reason why they don't perceive him. And they think, well, God must be a fairy tale, or God must be something. He's a mythological creature because they can't see him. The person who gives thanks to God and honors him, scales fall from their eyes. They see him everywhere. They see him providentially in every detail of their life. And they give thanks to him as such. So it's dangerous for humans not to give thanks to God because it blinds us spiritually. It darkens our hearts. It darkens our eyes to God and to his hand that is around us. And we understand that God's providence, and this is the reason why the doctrine of providence, to me, is so important. The doctrine of providence says many things, but three things it says is that God is there, God is near, and God cares. And because of that, in every detail of my life, in everything that I have, I see that directly from the hand of God. And what this does is it cultivates thanksgiving, it cultivates praise and worship to God. Without that doctrine, the doctrine of God's providence, I believe it affects your thanksgiving, and therefore your honor of God and your worship of him. I think the doctrine of providence should be something that we cultivate in our hearts as a glorious truth of God's care. He's not only the God who's there, somewhere out there, but he's near. But it's not just that he's near, it's that God cares about me and God cares about you. And so we have innumerable reasons to be thankful to God. And third, it is dangerous for us, let me repeat this. It is dangerous for us not to give thanks to God, because when we don't give thanks, we don't honor him rightly. We don't honor him properly. Two, it's dangerous for us not to give thanks to God because it blinds us. It darkens our hearts. Third, it is dangerous for us not to give thanks to God because it leads to all kinds of sins. I alluded to this earlier in the sermon, but it leads to all other kinds of sins. It leads to a whole bunch of other problems. Look at Romans chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. Look what he says as he continues. Therefore, God gave them up. They refused to give thanks and honor to him. They refused to lift up God in thanks and honor. And there's this wordplay that's happening here where the Apostle Paul says, so God gave them up. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies. Notice the parallel. They didn't honor God. God gave them to dishonor. When we do not honor God by giving him thanks the way that God has prescribed for us to give him thanks, the counter will always happen. Therefore, God that gave them to dishonor. God says, you've dishonored me, therefore I will dishonor you. And I will turn you over to the dishonorable things here. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So the lie there is that God has not created the world. And they end up worshiping. Notice, humans will always worship. It's not a matter of whether or not humans worship. Humans always worship. I'm going to add this little thing here. At no extra charge to you. Everywhere you go, everywhere you step, everywhere you drive, every building you walk into where there are humans, worship is happening. That's not the question. The question is, what God is being worshipped? from the classrooms, the public school, to the halls of Congress, to Walmart. Worship is always happening. That's not the question, brothers and sisters. The question is not whether or not America ought to worship a God. The question is, what God does America worship? That's the question. Everywhere you go as a human, humans are worshiping. As they're driving in their cars down the road, worship is happening. That's what we do. We were born to worship, created to worship. That's what we are. That's what it means to be a human. Born to worship. And when that worship isn't going to God, it's going to something. It's going to somewhere else. The question is what humans worshiping, is it worthy of their worship? Are they worshiping God who is true, or are they worshiping a lie? And when humans worship a lie, it drives them crazy. So if you look out at the world, you're like, man, the world has gone mad. Yeah. This is what happens to humans when we stop giving thanks and praise to the God who made us, to the God who created us. It's dangerous for us not to give thanks to God because it leads to all kinds of sins, as we see here. He gave them to disordered passions, to lust, to abuse. The absence of thanksgiving leads to lust, coveting, idolatry, disordered passions, entitlement. I shared with you a few weeks ago in our series in Galatians that the fruit of the Spirit grow together. They grow together. They grow in you might say clusters of attributes in that apple. I want you to think of the reason why when you come to lists in the Bible and it has all these sins, and then the Apostle Paul, as I'm going to show here in 2 Timothy in just a moment, the Apostle Paul has all these sins, one listed right after the other. The reason why is because those grow together. Those are all interconnected. The word Jonathan Edwards uses is concatenated. You get one, you probably have more than that going on. And at the heart of the center of one of the lists I'm going to show you right now, at the heart of it, the center is ungrateful, unthankful, unholy. Those go together. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. For people will be lovers of themselves. Remember when I said not all love is the fruit of the Spirit? Here is the parallel list from Galatians for the Spirit. This is, you could contrast this, right? For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents. No, this word right here, ungrateful. So at the heart of all of these sins is unthankfulness. I'm not thankful for what God has done for me. Ungrateful, that creates a whole bunch of other sins. Ungrateful, right next to unholy. And then in the next verse, heartless. A child, the reason why it's so important that we teach our children gratitude and to say thank you is because a child who's not grateful is a child that is heartless. And if we chalk it up as parents to saying, well, it's just Timmy's little quirk, he doesn't like to say thank you. No. Thankfulness needs to be cultivated in that human because 50 years down the road, he will turn into a demon. He'll turn his world into a living hell for himself. We need to cultivate thanksgiving. It's imperative. It's a matter of life and death. Thanksgiving and gratitude is at the very heart of spiritual formation and discipleship inside of the church. And so he says, heartless, unappeasable. There are people that aren't completely ungrateful for, I'm not trying to be politically charged here. It's the illustration that pops into my mind. SNAP benefits, food benefits from the government, with no sense of gratitude, only entitlement, and completely unappeasable. Nothing is ever enough. They're unappeasable, they're heartless, they're slanderous, they're without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers, again, notice how he bookends the list, lovers of money, of self, and then he closes it with the lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Not all forms of love, by the way, are fruit of the Spirit. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Well, that's what happens when you're ungrateful. You're covetous. Why? Why are you coveting another man's wife? It's because you're not thankful for what God has given to you. Why are you coveting? Why is it that there's just lust for more? It's because an ungrateful heart always lusts. An ungrateful heart always covets, always wants more, is never satiated. It's dangerous for us, brothers and sisters, to not give thanks to God. The word there in 2 Timothy 3:2 for ungrateful is akaristos. Charis is the word grace. Charistos, grace. If you've ever met someone named Charis, grace. This is akaristos. An A is put in front of charistos, which negates it. No grace. A person who is unthankful is a person who has no grace. And this is the reason why we, as the children of God, we have received grace. We are people of grace. We are to be characterized by grace, and as such, we give thanks to God. That makes us thankful to Him when we understand what He has given to us. But we want better, brothers and sisters. We want better. We want to be people, you and I. We here at this church, we want to be people who are characterized by giving thanks. We don't want what is true of the world to be true of us. We want to give thanks to God in all circumstances of our lives. It doesn't mean that I want to be that. I want to be a person who's thankful to God in all of my circumstances. And I confess to you, I admit to you, I am frequently not. I'm frequently not thankful in all of my circumstances. But I want to be. I want to be a person who is always in a position of giving thanks to God in my daily life for all of the goodness for Him that He has given to me. Now, when we say that we want to fulfill the commandment to be thankful in all circumstances, we're not saying that we are thankful for all of our circumstances. Many of the circumstances that we find ourselves in are awful. It's not that I need to give thanks for every circumstance that I find myself in, but rather in the midst of that dark circumstance, per se, I always have a reason to give thanks to God. I always do. I always have reason to give thanks to God for the salvation He has given to me, for the life He's given to me, for the world He has created. There's always reason for us to erupt with a symphony of thanksgiving. And so we always see God's benevolent hand around us. And we can't worship without saying thank you. We don't want to be people who are given to vain repetition. Absolutely not. But we as God's children are characterized by thanksgiving, and that's the reason why every week we come to these elements and we give thanks to Him. Again, not for the purpose of just going through the motions of things, but an opportunity for us to pause and to say, God, thank you. We want to, like a young married couple, right? A young married couple, I want you to imagine for yourself, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a marriage counselor. You're a marriage counselor, and a young married couple, comes into your office, they sit down on your couch, and the issue that the wife presents to you as the marriage counselor is that her husband he said thank you, or he said I love you on their wedding night, and he said I love you on the honeymoon, but he doesn't say I love you anymore. I want you to imagine for a moment a husband, a young groom, who says something along the lines of, well, I don't want to say it too often because I don't want it to not be special. So how often should the young man say I love you to his wife? Once every 5 weeks? Once a month? How often would you tell this young couple that they should exchange an I love you with one another? My hope is that you would say to them frequently, every day. Right? I can't remember. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I can't remember a time where I haven't told my wife, in a day, I love you. I'm sure it happens, but it happens frequently. It happens sometimes several times a day. I love you. Right? Thank you for your contribution. That's something in a good relationship, an intimate relationship with your spouse, is necessary. You have to repeat it. It's not the repetition that's the problem. It's the vanity in it. If it's just things you mouth, that's not what you want. But you don't want to say, you don't want to stop saying, I love you, I appreciate you, thank you for what you do for this family, thank you for what's happening. That's what brings intimacy together in the relationship. When we come to these elements once a week, we pause, we say, God, thank you. God, I love you. That's intimacy. Intimacy with God. We don't want to be people, again, who just mouth it. We want our heart to follow behind that. And so we come to these elements, with those things in mind. And as the Apostle Paul records in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, Eucharistia, that's where that word comes from, when he had given thanks, he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. As often as you do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, and he said, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. As often as you do this in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again." I encourage all of you who call upon the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, you are welcome to this table, to this Thanksgiving table. There's elements located in the back of the room there. Many of you picked them up on your way in. If you hadn't have an opportunity to do that, we'll give you that moment now. When you go back to your seat, I would encourage you to take a moment to pray before God, to confess sin before him if that's needed, to ask God to fill your heart and your life with his Spirit, to thank him for all of the goodness that he has given to you. And then when we've paused for a moment, we'll come back together as a congregation and we'll partake.